Hey, what's up guys? Enum here. So, after much request, mainly by Zicho, but others on the Life of Warcraft page and others as well, have been wondering how I play Frost and was wondering if I could make a Frost guide. So, this is going to be the intro into a series actually. So, I'm going to show you my spec, kind of my playstyle and how I play Frost, as well as this is going to be the start of a dueling series where I will play each class and probably not every spec, but like I'll fight probably no healers for the most part, or tanks, mainly against other DPS specs, but I will show you how to fight them in a 1v1. Of course it won't be duels because we all know dueling's broken in nowadays because of legendaries, but we will be doing war games, so can show you how to kind of fight in a 1v1 situation in an arena. And yeah, so let's go ahead and get into it. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to go ahead and get into is we're going to go ahead and get into my spec and how I roll. So for the most part, there's two different kinds of specs when it comes to Frost, but one of them is definitely better than the other. The two different types of specs, you have consistency spec, also known as machine gun spec, or you have breath spec, which is the top choice right now, which is what I'm running and which is what you'll see most Frost Death Knights running. So it's a pretty straightforward spec. There's not really much variation to it. The biggest variation I've seen is some people will either go with Horn of Winter or Freezing Fog. Main reason they'll go for Horn of Winter is it gains two extra runes, and you get additional 20 runic power. It's only on a 30-second cooldown, and it helps you keep your breath up longer. And then the other area where people kind of switch it up, and actually this one you will switch up depending on what you're fighting in an arena, is this right here between Volatile Shielding and Permafrost. Maybe White Walker. I have seen White Walker being used, but other than that, that's pretty much what you're going to stick with. So the our first tier, the 56 tier, is going to be Murderous Efficiency, which, consuming the Killing Machine effect, has a 65 chance to gain you 1 rune. So why do we run with that? So when you're bursting, when you're using your Breathless Undergo, so you're constantly regenerating runes, and you're constantly getting Killing Machine procs really fast. So this helps you keep breath up longer, because when you're not only getting runes back because you're spending runic power, but you're also getting runes back when you use Obliterate to consume a Killing Machine, and you're going to get a lot of Killing Machines. When I show you the burst and rotation, you're going to see how many Killing Machines I get. And the next tier at 57, like I told you, there is two different kind of ways you can go with it. You can go Horn of Winter, which I don't really use. I honestly haven't used it, but I have seen others use it, and it's to keep breath up longer. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. When you're using breath, once you start getting low, you generate the 2 extra runes and you generate 20 extra runic power. I prefer Freezing Fog, honestly, because not only is it more, it's an overall damage increase to not only Howling Blast, but your Frost Fever, which may not seem like Frost Fever doesn't do the most damage in the world, but over time it's going to add up. Those dots will add up, those ticks. I mean, I can't tell you how many times where I've had a close match where they were able to get away from me, where if I could have just had one more like stronger disease tick, they would have been dead. So that's kind of why I go with Freezing Fog, especially because it's such an AoE heavy, talent, and this spec is a lot of AoE damage, especially in battlegrounds. In arenas, it's you're doing some AoE damage, but if they're smart, they're not going to be stacked. They're gonna, as soon as they see you using breath, they're going to split up, because if they're stacking, it's just going to be bad for them, because I'm going to be doing damage to everyone, a lot of damage. So then the next tier we're going to go ahead and go with is Hungering Rune Weapon. So empowering your rune weapon, gaining 1 rune every 5 runic power instantly, and every 1.0 seconds for 15 seconds. So it's constantly giving you runes, and it's constantly giving you runic power every 1.5 seconds for 15 seconds. I mean, self-explanatory. Why do you use that? because you want to keep breath up as long as possible, and this is how you do it. If you don't have this, you're just going to have the regular empowered rune weapon, which is great, but compared to this, you're not going to keep breath up as long. The next one we go with is Winter is Coming. I have seen some very, very, very few I've seen using Blinding Sleep. Blinding Sleep's okay. It's pretty much like a blind, not really a blind. Yeah, it's like a blind, but a really short blind. And it can be it gets broken by damage. It's just a CC, which you're doing AoE damage, and it's just not gonna be good. I mean, if you get a healer out in the open and you want to stun him, if you're trying to get just a little more CC, that'll work. But honestly, Winter is Coming is gonna be your better CC. Basically, when Pillar of Frost is activated, it stuns people for 4 seconds when they're hit by a Remorseless Winter for 5 times, which it may sound like it's easy to avoid, but there's only a few classes that can really, really avoid it. I even get most druids with it if they're not smart, because a smart druid is going to dispel it, because they can dispel your Winter is Coming, but we know how some players are. They're not the best. So next tier, this is the one where I told you you're going to be switching around a lot depending on what you're fighting. So Permafrost is a talent that when you deal damage on auto attacks, you get an absorb shield equal to 30% of the damage. It's pretty great. It's good against melee. It's good against most things. The only real time you might go volatile shielding is caster heavy comps, when you really need to absorb some more of that damage. And not only does it absorb damage, but when it expires, 25% of the damage that you took when people were attacking you goes back to the enemies as 25%, everyone near you. The problem I see with that is most players are smart. They're not going to attack you during Remorseless Winter. They're going to be like, or not Remorseless Winter, I'm sorry, Anti-Magic Shell. They're not going to be like, oh, he's using Anti-Magic Shell, let me keep bursting, let me keep using my abilities. And even if you don't have this, they're still probably going to stop, which sucks because I use it a lot to try and build up more rooting power. But I know most people know not to attack a Death Knight who are using it, so I mainly use it as a defensive / offensive cooldown, and I'll go over that in a little bit on how I use that. And then the next one, there's really not. It's Gathering the Storm. You really wouldn't go Runic Continuation. Frost Scythe is honestly absolutely terrible for PvP. Don't ever use that. I don't even think I've ever seen anyone use it. So, Gathering the Storm, each rune spent during Remorseless Winter increases the damage by 15%. Each rune increases it by 15%, and it extends the duration. So, a normal Remorseless Winter, I think, is about 10 seconds? 10 or 15? 8 seconds, okay. So, Remorseless Winter lasts 8 seconds. I can get Remorseless Winter to last 20 seconds. And that's the cooldown of Remorseless Winter. Remorseless Winter's cooldown is 20 seconds. When I'm bursting, using breath and everything, I can get Remorseless Winter to last 20 seconds because I'm spending that many runes that fast. And it stacks up to 10. So that 15% damage increase is up to 10. So it adds up really quick and it does a lot of damage. So whenever you're using Remorseless Winter, you're really going to want to spam Obliterate. You're going to want to make sure you have runes. And then of course, Breath of Saragossa. It's called Breath Spec for a reason. You're not going to use you're not going to use anything else for a Breath Spec. So I'll briefly go over Machine Gun Spec or Consistency Spec real quick. So with that one, you're going to go Icy Talons, Frozen Pulse, Avalanche, and Obliteration. So, I mean, the basis for Machine Gun Spec is consistent damage. The downtime in Breath Spec kind of sucks. You're doing good damage, but you're not doing the best damage. Consistency Spec lacks in burst, but makes up for its consistent damage, which is why it used to be really good before they buffed Frost and buffed breath a little bit. The basis is when you use Frost Strike, you gain 10% increased haste, attack speed mainly, not haste, 10% hate. Attack speed. So what does that mean? That means more melee strikes, which means more killing machine procs, which means more damage. And then you have this Frozen Pulse, so when you have fewer than 2 full runes, when you're spamming Obliterate and you don't have any more runes and you're like, well, there goes my damage, this does your damage for you. It'll make your auto attacks do 40,000 frost damage. Now when you look at Icy Talons, your auto attacks are 30% faster. So that damage really adds up. And then Avalanche, that's another big damage, is whenever your Pillar of Frost is active, it does 30,000 frost damage to everyone who's nearby while it's activated. So everyone around you is getting hit by icicles. It just does a crap ton of damage. For this one, it's still Gathering the Storm, because honestly you're going to be spamming Obliterate quite a bit. And then Obliteration, so what Obliteration does is for the next 8 seconds while Frost Strike will trigger Killing Machine. So when you use Frost Strike, Killing Machine proc. So pretty much when you're using your burst and using Obliteration, you're going to use Frost Strike, use Obliterate. If Rhyme procs, you'll use Hang Blast, and it's just Frost Strike, Obliterate, Frost Strike, Obliterate, Frost Strike, Obliterate. If Rhyme procs, Howling Blast. So that's how that spec goes. So let's go ahead and switch back, and then I will go ahead and get into the PvP talents. Boop. We good? Yep, we good. Alright, so PvP talents. So one of the main reasons I went Orc is because I kind of liked Relentlessness, because I was Unholy. Relentlessness does not really work with the breath spec, and the reason Relentless doesn't work with the breath spec too much is because if you get stunned or CC during your burst, you are screwed. Like, it's just out the window. So you're really going to want your Trinket, and honestly in most situations you're really going to want your Trinket. Relentlessness is nice for Unholy, especially when you're Orc, because it stacks. But as Frost, you really need a medallion to be able to continue up your burst. Because I mean, if you think about it, your breath spec's 2-minute cooldown, your Trinket's a 2-minute cooldown. So usually you're going to use the both at the same time because you want to be able to keep your burst up. Most of the time you want to save your Trinket, obviously, to either A, save your life, B, save your healer's life, or C, get the kill. But honestly, it's going to be, most of the time it's going to be C, get the kill, because your burst is so insane. I can't tell you how many times my arena matches only last like 20 seconds. My burst, and then it's it. The only time they last longer is if they survive my burst. Next, Reinforced Armor. So this one's going to determine, kind of depends on what you're fighting. So you're going to use Reinforced Armor most of the time, but Sparring is going to be, that's going to be what you use if you're fighting melee heavy teams. So if you get like a Warrior Rogue or just really melee heavy. The next tier, Dark Simulacrum, is great because being able to steal CCs is a game changer. I cannot tell you how many games I've won by stealing a Druid Cyclone, by stealing a Mage's Polymorph, or actually using some of their offense abilities by stealing a Mage's Blink or their Ice Block, like a defensive ability. It really helps. Or even just a heal, just something like, if I'm dying and my healer's getting CC, I really need a heal, and I'm doing good damage to their DPS and their healer's healing, I'll Dark Sim their healer. If they're using a big heal, take their heal, and boom, I get a heal. Another viable choice is Anti-Magic Zone. It's a little bit easier than Dark Simulacrum. Dark Simulacrum is, you need to be pretty skillful with it. You need to have been playing a Death Knight for a while, I think, or at least been playing the game a while, to know what to expect and know when to use it. The next one is also going to be really dependent on what you're playing with. Most of the time I run Necrotic Aura because it increases magical damage, which Frost damage is magical damage. So it's really great for your burst and your breath, and really pretty much all of your abilities use magic except for Obliterate and like Death Strike and your melee attacks, obviously. Heartstop Aura is really great when you're facing teams like monks, druids, or anything that can really get away from you really easily. And usually when you use Heartstop Aura, you pair it up with Delirium, which Delirium makes it so that their cooldown recovery rate of movement enhancement abilities by 25% stacks up to 2 times, so 50%. So if their blink is on a, I don't know, 20-second cooldown, I think, if I have Delirium on them, that's 50%, so it increases their cooldown from 20 seconds to 30 seconds, which really over time, that's going to add up. That's going to really screw them when they can't get away from me. It's really great for monks because sticking on a monk is so hard. That's why Heartstop Aura is great. And then you get the extra cooldown recovery rate by another 20%. So that's another one. So it stacks with Delirium, so that's why that one's so good. And then if you're running with a melee heavy team like a Warrior or Rogue, this is another really good option. They lose 3% of their maximum health every 2 seconds you're near them, up to a maximum of 5 stacks, so 3 times 5, 15%, which that's another really good option. And then the next thing you're going to go with, there's not really an option here, is Overpowered Rune Weapon. It decreases the cooldown of Empowerment Rune Weapon by 2 minutes, which, you know, of course, is your Hungry Rune Weapon when you're breast spec. Decreases it by 2 minutes. So every minute you're going to be able to use Empowered Rune Weapon. That is ridiculous, and it will get you your half burst, which I'm going to go ahead and go over what I call whole burst, full burst, and half burst. I'm going to go over kind of what that means to me, and maybe you guys can use it too. So let's go ahead and get into my rotation and kind of like my mindset on how I do things. Right, so I'm going to go ahead and give you a brief overview of what I call full burst, actually max burst, full burst, and half burst. Alright, so I'm going to give you a brief overview of what I call max burst, full burst, and half burst. So these are terms I came up with myself, at least I haven't heard anyone else use them. Really simple, really simple. It's just terms I use to let my team know, and like people at PvP with like Demon, Zicho, they know what it means, at least they should know. I hope you guys, after this video, you guys are going to know what it means when I say I'm half bursting, or I'm full bursting, or I'm max bursting. So max burst is when I have everything. That's when I have Cindergosa's Fury. It's when I have Breath of Cindergosa, Pillar, Empowered Rune Weapon, and Blood Fury. It's when I have all of those abilities, because that's when I'm going to be doing the most damage. And of course Remorseless Winter, but that's kind of implied. So then I have my full burst. So that's pretty much the same thing, except I don't have Cindergosa's Fury. Now, full burst is still really good, and it's still really comparable with max burst. It's just Cindergosa's Fury does a lot of damage and usually can get a really good kill. And then we have half burst. So the great thing about being about breast spec is you should be able to start out with max burst, and then you'll have half burst, and then full burst, then half burst again, and then go back to either full, and then you'll get another full burst before you get to max burst. So what I mean by that is Breath of Cindergosa is on a 1 minute or 2 minute cooldown, while your Pillar of Frost and your Hungry Rune Weapon is on a 2 minute cooldown. So in between your breath's cooldown, you should be able to use Pillar of Frost and Empowering Rune Weapon again, along with, of course, Remorseless Winter, which it still does a lot of damage. Of course, it doesn't do as much damage as having Breath of Cindergosa, and I could also use it as a defensive, but it does an insane amount of damage, which it's great. I really like having half burst. And when I say I use it as a defensive, I don't use it as a defensive too much, but what I mean when I use it as a defensive is if my healer really needs me to be playing defensive, or if I'm really close to dying, I'll pop my offensive cooldowns, my half burst, and instead of using Frost Strike to burn my running power, I'm going to use Death Strike, and it's a really good way to stay alive, and a good way to kind of still keep pressure, just not as much pressure. Alright, so now that we've gone over that, we're going to go ahead and get into my rotation and kind of what I do there. Alright, so let's go ahead and get into the grid of it. So this is going to be what I do usually when I'm opening up on someone. Now, of course, it's going to change, especially depending on my situation, who I'm playing with, what I'm playing against. But for the most part, when I'm just having fun, when I'm in a random battleground, this is how I start out. This is how I go ham, especially like on warriors, shamans, really classes I know I can get my burst on really easily and not have to worry too much about what's going on here. So, you know, most of the time, best case scenario, you can get some runic power up first. Spend some runes, get some runic power. Now, honestly, this isn't the best plan because you're really going to have a hard time just getting on there and getting on. So usually you're really going to want to go ahead and get a Chain of Device on there. And you're going to want to pop Remorseless Winter and Pillar of Frost at the same time so you can get the benefit and get that stun. So we're going to go ahead and do that and start spamming Obliterates. We're going to pop Breath. Now we're not going to use Empowering Rune Weapon yet. We're going to try and hold out for it, but we need to start using it now. So we're using it now, and we're spamming Obliterate. That's proccing our Gathering in the Storm. It's keeping our breath up. It's doing a crap ton of damage. And my AMS to protect myself from CC or from more damage. We still need to use Remorseless Winter again. So we're getting Gathering the Storm back up. We're just doing insane amount of damage. Now it's getting down, it's getting low, and then there you have it. Breath's about to be over, breath's over. We dished out an insane amount of damage. So in that amount of time, we did, let's make sure we're on the current fight here. We did, oh, of course it would go away. There we go. So we did over 3 million damage, which doesn't sound about right. No, that's right. We did about 3 million damage just in that really short amount of time. I kept breath up for a good 30 seconds, and like I said, you can keep it up longer if you have Horn of Winter. And Blood Elf is honestly a really good pick for this spec, because that's another thing they can do, is not only do they get a silence, but they also get the extra runic power. Now see how I already have my burst, my Pillar of Frost back with Remorseless Winter. So now I could use my half burst. Now of course in a PvP situation I would already have runic power weapon back. And so I'd be able to spam this and I'd be doing a lot more damage, but unfortunately since it's just a target dummy, I can't really show you that. But you'll see it when I start doing the dueling videos and kind of show you the how-to. But that's kind of how I do it. That's my half burst. That, as you saw before, was my full burst, which was kind of a really pathetic attempt. I've definitely had better, but it just gives you a general idea. For the most part, that's about it. If you have any questions, leave a comment. I definitely will be going in more depth on how I attack certain classes once I start coming out with the dueling videos. That way you get more of an idea on how to fight tactically with the Frost DK and not just, go in. Like what I just did does not always work. You cannot just always run in. So for example, against a rogue, as soon as I start bursting on that rogue, what are they going to do? They're going to Cloak of Shadows, they're going to vanish. I wasted my cooldown, I wasted all my cooldowns, and they're just waiting for my breath to be over. They're waiting for it to drop, they're waiting for all my cooldowns to go away, and then they pop on me, they pop their cooldowns. They already used Cloak of Shadows, which I believe is a minute cooldown still, I don't know, it's been a while since I played a rogue. They'll probably already have it back by then. I'll only have half burst, I might not even have burst yet, might only have my Remorseless Winter, and they have the upper hand. And there's other classes that are like that too. A mage can arcane mage can easily avoid my burst with their triple blink. A warrior can easily avoid, a fury warrior I should say, a fury warrior could easily avoid it by double leaping or triple leaping away if they talent into that. Druids, if they're good, can, but usually I'm really quick on gripping them back when they use whatever that thing's called. You would think is a resto druid. I would know it's a displacer beast. When they displace their beast, I'm usually really good on that. I'm also really good at predicting when they're gonna try and CC me like a stun. Like usually when I'm bursting like that on a Retribution Paladin, I'm going to use AMS right away. Not right away, but as soon as I start it, because I expect them to hodge me and try to burst me as well. So I'll use AMS as offensive/defensive, where they're drilling into me with holy magic. That's helping me build up runic power, as well as protecting me from them and protecting me from their stuns. Now let's say I misjudge it, they didn't stun me yet, I still have my Trinket as a backup to continue my burst. But like I said, I'll go into more depth because when a pally bubbles, I immediately stop my burst. I cancel my breath so I can maintain my runic power. And that's another really important thing, is you need to stick on your opponent. If there's nothing, stick on something. If you want to continue your burst and continue on something, you need to use anything near you if your main target is getting away from you. So for example, hunters are pretty good at escaping me. But what I'll do is I'll turn to their pet and start hitting their pet and use it to keep up my breath until I can close the gap with the hunter again. And that's just another really good of using your surroundings to pretty much benefit you. It's the same thing with healing. If you really need healing, don't be afraid to run behind a pillar and use a pet to heal up. Spam Obliterate on it. Get Death Strikes out. Use it to heal. Kill their pet. Let them come to you. Do not chase them out in the open. Our biggest weakness as a Frost DK is mobility. You do not want to be caught out in the open against a Frost Mage, a Boomkin, or really any kind of caster range. Pillars are everyone's best friend, really. Everyone can use a pillar to their advantage, especially DKs. Let them come to you, be patient. You may think they're gonna get their cooldowns back, they're gonna heal, so are you. So hopefully you enjoyed the guide. I know it was a little bit long. Yeah, so hopefully you enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think. If you have any other tips you'd like to give, anything I missed, definitely leave a comment. Definitely open for criticism. Dueling videos should come out pretty soon here. I'm working on them with Zicho. And don't forget to leave a subscribe. Of course, you can follow me on Twitter. All the links will be in the description. Or not Twitter, but Twitch. Follow me on Twitch. And yeah, I'll catch you guys next time. Hope you enjoyed.